The afternoon sun, typically a harbinger of warmth and comfort, cast long, accusatory shadows across the neatly manicured lawn of my daughter-in-law's suburban home. I was simply driving past, a small, brightly wrapped package for my granddaughter, Clara, tucked onto the passenger seat. My intention was to leave it discreetly in the mailbox, avoiding another strained encounter. But then I saw her, Serena, my son, Ethan's widow. She was wrestling with a series of large black trash bags, dragging them with an almost violent urgency towards the curbside dumpster. There was a particular, unsettling determination in her movements, a fierce energy that felt entirely out of place for such a mundane chore. And then, a flash of mint green. My breath hitched. It was unmistakable. A soft, woolen edge peeking out from one of the gaping bags. Clara's baby blanket. The blanket I had painstakingly knitted, stitch by loving stitch, for my precious granddaughter. It was crumpled, soiled, seemingly discarded without a second thought, shoved unceremoniously amongst the household refuse. A cold dread coiled in my stomach, quickly replaced by a surge of indignant fury. Why? Why would she throw away something so deeply cherished, so intrinsically linked to Ethan's memory, to Clara's infancy? I didn't hesitate. A force greater than myself seemed to propel my elderly frame. I veered the car across the street, a desperate urgency overriding any concern for propriety. Serena was already retreating inside, the heavy lid of the dumpster clanging shut with a hollow finality. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I emerged from my vehicle, my gaze fixed on the overflowing bin. Reaching the dumpster, I heaved open the lid, a noxious mix of garbage odors assaulting my senses. My hands, trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief, plunged into the detritus, searching. And there it was, nestled among coffee grounds and discarded mail, the mint green blanket. I pulled it out, clutching it to my chest. Its soft wool, surprisingly rough against my skin, smelling faintly of expensive perfume, and, unmistakably, neglect. I drove home in a daze, the rescued blanket lying on the seat beside me like a silent accusation. Once inside, the security of my own four walls did little to calm my racing mind. I spread the blanket out on my bed, attempting to smooth away the wrinkles of its indignity. As my fingers traced the familiar pattern, a strange, unyielding lump beneath the fabric startled me. It was hard, rectangular, foreign, not part of the blanket's original stuffing. A prickle of unease sharpened my curiosity. My hands began to shake. What could be hidden within Clara's treasured blanket? Why would Serena discard it with such venom? And what secret could it possibly contain? The answer, when it came, would not merely be a shock. It would be the brutal unmasking of a lie, the horrific truth behind my son's death, and the darkest secret my daughter-in-law had ever kept. My life, I instinctively knew, would never be the same. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 69 years old. For the past 3 years, this quiet house, nestled on a tree-lined street in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, has been my solitary haven. It's a comfortable space, filled with the echoes of a life once shared, now defined by absence. 3 years ago, the vibrant tapestry of my existence was irrevocably torn when I lost my only son, Ethan. He was 32, a brilliant, dedicated surgeon whose life revolved around the demanding hours of the emergency room, saving lives with a compassion that often left me in awe. Ethan had been the cornerstone of my world since his father, my beloved husband Arthur, passed 15 years prior from a sudden heart attack. Losing Arthur had been a profound blow, but Ethan's unwavering presence, his quick wit and comforting strength, had been my anchor through the tumultuous waters of grief. Now, with Ethan gone too, the silence in my home often felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. He had married Serena Hayes 2 years before his death. She was a nurse, bright and ambitious, with a flawless, almost unnervingly perfect smile. They had met at the hospital, a shared passion for healing initially drawing them together. I remembered the first time he brought her home for Sunday dinner. She wore a cream-coloured sundress, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her manners impeccable. She radiated an aura of effortless elegance, a cool self-possession that even then struck me as a little too polished, a little too rehearsed. But Ethan was completely captivated. His eyes, usually so serious and focused, softened and shone with an incandescent joy whenever he looked at her. He spoke of her with an almost boyish adoration, declaring her to be the woman of his life, the one with whom he wanted to build a family, a future. And despite my faint, nagging reservations, a mother's instinct, perhaps, whispering a cautionary note, I wanted to believe him. I wanted desperately for my son to have found the profound happiness he so richly deserved. A year into their marriage, Serena announced her pregnancy. Ethan was, predictably, euphoric. He called me daily, providing meticulous updates on Serena's doctor's appointments, the baby's growth, the latest ultrasound images. He bought a beautiful new house, a spacious 2-story dwelling with a generous garden. Together they painted the nursery a soft, ethereal pink, and I remembered Ethan, his usually precise surgeon's hands clumsy but determined, assembling Clara's crib with an almost childlike excitement. He was so utterly happy, so full of hope, a vibrant picture of an expectant father. And then Clara arrived. She was born a few weeks early, tiny and delicate, with a shock of dark hair and Ethan's deep, soulful eyes. Holding her for the first time was like receiving a precious, unexpected gift from the universe, a second chance at unconditional love, at nurturing and caring. She was beautiful, an exquisite miniature of my beloved son. For weeks leading up to her birth, I had poured all my love and anticipation into knitting that mint-green baby blanket. Every single stitch, every intricate lace edge was infused with my longing, my hope, my boundless affection for this new life. It was a tactile manifestation of my heart, a tangible embrace I couldn't physically give her when she was still just a dream. Ethan adored it. He would often say it was magical, that whenever Clara was swaddled in its soft embrace, her cries would invariably cease, replaced by a contented sigh. He treated that blanket like a sacred treasure, a symbol of the burgeoning family he so deeply cherished. But after the accident, everything changed, everything fractured. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in September, 3 years ago. The memory of it is branded onto my soul, a scar that still aches with every mention. Serena's voice was a ragged shriek, fragmented and choked with sobs, tearing through the phone line like a raw wound. Eleanor! Oh my God! Eleanor! Ethan! He's had an accident. He fell down the stairs. His head. He's not responding. Her words were a torrent of terror, each one a hammer blow to my heart. I remember very little of the drive to the hospital, only the vice-like grip of my sweating hands on the steering wheel, the road blurring into an indistinct tunnel as I sped, maniacally, through traffic. 15 minutes. That's all it took, a frantic, desperate race against an unknown clock. When I burst into the emergency room, the sterile air did little to calm the storm raging inside me. Serena was there, huddled in a plastic chair, her face buried in her hands. She was wearing a pearl grey dress, a faint, dark stain marring one sleeve. The sight of her, so broken, intensified my own mounting dread. She looked up, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, and then she was running towards me, collapsing into my arms. Her sobs shook her whole body, a visceral, guttural sound that echoed the unspoken terror in my own heart. I held her, but my mind was elsewhere, desperate, pleading to see my son. I needed to see him, to assure myself he was all right, to whisper words of comfort, to simply feel his hand. Then, the doctor appeared. His face, etched with that familiar, somber gravity common to all medical professionals on the cusp of delivering devastating news, seemed to blur through my tear-filled eyes. He spoke the words that shattered my world, splintering it into a million irreparable pieces. Matthew has died. Severe head trauma. There was nothing we could do. The world tilted. A guttural scream tore from my throat, raw and agonizing. My legs gave out beneath me, and I crumpled onto the cold, unforgiving hospital floor, the linoleum pressing against my cheek. Serena, despite her own apparent devastation, was there again, her arms around me, murmuring reassurances. "Everything will be all right, Eleanor. Ethan would have wanted us to be strong." But nothing was all right. Nothing would ever be again. My husband gone, and now my only son. Ethan was all I had left, my vibrant, brilliant boy, extinguished in an instant. The crushing weight of loss settled over me, a suffocating shroud. In the initial weeks and months that followed, I understood Serena's withdrawal. Grief is a cruel, isolating beast, and she too had lost her husband, the father of her child. She needed time, space, a chance to navigate the desolate landscape of widowhood. I tried to be patient, to give her the latitude she needed. But as the months bled into a year, then two, the distance between us grew wider, deeper. She brought Clara to see me less and less, each cancellation accompanied by a fresh excuse. Clara was unwell. Serena had an insurmountable workload. She needed to reorganize her life. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, the overbearing, intrusive figure. So I waited. I called, gently asking if I could visit my granddaughter, longing for the comfort of Clara's innocent embrace, the flicker of Ethan's eyes in her face. Sometimes, Serena would agree, granting me a brief, tightly controlled visit. Other times, my calls simply went unanswered, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. When she did permit me to see Clara, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something had fundamentally shifted in Serena. She was different, yes, colder, more distant, but it wasn't just the pallor of grief. Her gaze, which had once held a feigned warmth, now seemed to possess a calculating edge, a sharpness that made me instinctively uneasy. It was as if a mask had slipped, revealing a glint of something harder, more dispassionate beneath. I tried to rationalize it, attributing it to the trauma of Ethan's death, imagining it had altered her as profoundly as it had altered me. I desperately tried to be understanding, to grant her the space I believed she needed. But a silent, growing disquiet festered within me, a subtle dissonance between the woman I thought I knew and the one who now stood before me, holding my granddaughter at arm's length. The disquiet simmered beneath the surface of my everyday life for 3 long years. Then, on a crisp October afternoon, the air carrying the first hints of autumn's bite, everything changed. I had purchased a whimsical new set of building blocks for Clara, envisioning her delight, her small hands stacking them into impossible towers. My plan was to drive past Serena's house, leave the gift in the mailbox, and retreat before I could impose, before I could become that nosy mother-in-law again. I simply wanted Clara to know her grandmother was thinking of her, showering her with the silent affection Serena seemed increasingly unwilling to facilitate. I parked my car across the street. The gentle hum of the engine, the only sound breaking the suburban quiet. And then I saw her. Serena emerged from the garage, her movements clipped and forceful, dragging several large black trash bags towards the curb. There was an unusual intensity in her actions, a strange, almost aggressive energy as she hoisted the bags, one after another, into the gaping maw of the industrial-sized dumpster. My gaze, drawn by her unusual vehemence, snagged on something familiar, something that made my heart seize in my chest. Peeking precariously from the top of one of the bags, half tangled and crumpled, was Clara's mint green blanket. The blanket. The one I had knitted with such fervent love, the one Ethan had cherished as if it were spun from starlight itself. Serena, with a strange, almost hateful violence, shoved it deeper into the dumpster, as if she wished to obliterate it, to erase its very existence. I froze, a cold shock seizing my limbs. Why? Why would she throw away something so deeply personal, so entwined with Clara's earliest memories, with Ethan's adoration? Why would she discard a tangible piece of my son's love? The question echoed, hollow and disbelieving, in my mind. Serena slammed the dumpster lid shut, with a resounding clang that seemed to reverberate through the quiet street. She then turned, her shoulders stiff, and disappeared back into the house, leaving me trembling in my car. My breathing was ragged, my hands clenched into tight fists on the steering wheel. A potent cocktail of rage and profound sadness swirled inside me, warring for dominance. I waited, counting the slow, agonizing minutes until I was certain she wouldn't reappear. Then, with a fierce resolve hardening my jaw, I exited the car. The walk to the dumpster felt impossibly long, each step heavy with purpose. I heaved open the heavy lid, the stench of forgotten refuse far more potent now. My hands, still shaking, plunged into the murky depths, rummaging through the black bags until my fingers brushed against the soft, familiar wool. And there it was, Clara's blanket. Dirty, wrinkled, imbued with the lingering scent of Serena's expensive perfume and the bitter tang of raw neglect. I carefully extracted it, holding it to my chest like a fragile, wounded bird. I got back into my car, not daring to glance back at Serena's house, the abandoned blanket an almost unbearable weight in my lap. I arrived home, my body trembling, a tremor that seemed to originate deep within my bones. I locked the door, needing the sanctuary of my own space, needing to be alone with this inexplicable betrayal. I went straight to my bedroom, clutching the blanket. I needed to understand why. Serena had cast it aside with such callous disregard, as if it were utterly worthless. With meticulous care, I spread the blanket across my bed, smoothing its surface with unsteady hands. It was soiled, but remarkably intact. The delicate lace edges I had painstakingly crafted still held their shape. The mint green, though dulled under the lamplight, was still recognizably the color of hope and innocence. My fingers, almost instinctively, began to trace the familiar patterns, feeling every texture, every single stitch I had made years ago. And then I felt it. Right in the very center of the blanket, a hard, rectangular lump, meticulously concealed between the layers of fabric. It wasn't padding, wasn't part of the blanket's original design. It was something else, something someone had deliberately, painstakingly hidden there. My heart jolted, a sudden frantic drumbeat against my ribs. My hands grew damp with a sudden inexplicable dread. What was this? Why would something be hidden inside my granddaughter's baby blanket? I flipped the blanket over, my eyes scanning the underside, searching for any anomaly, any clue. And there it was, almost perfectly camouflaged on the bottom edge, a line of impossibly neat stitches, barely discernible, sewn with thread that precisely matched the fabric's muted green. Someone had opened the blanket, inserted something, and then meticulously restitched it with such precision that it was almost impossible to detect the alteration. A cold shiver snaked down my spine. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. This was a secret. I walked to my nightstand, my movements jerky and uncoordinated, and retrieved my sewing scissors, the very same ones I had used to create that blanket years ago. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold them steady. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, I found the starting point of the concealed seam and began to cut, slowly, deliberately. Each snip of the scissors sounded unnaturally loud in the profound silence of my room, an almost sacrilegious tearing. I felt an overwhelming sense of trespass, as if I were violating something forbidden, something I should never touch. But the compulsion to know, the burning need to unravel this mystery, was too strong to resist. I couldn't stop now. The final threads parted, exposing a narrow, dark opening. I tentatively inserted my fingers, brushing against something cold, metallic. With painstaking care, I extracted the object, and when I finally held it in my hands, the air seemed to abandon my lungs. It was a cell phone, small, black, and utterly dark, its design betraying its age, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, a relic from a time when Ethan was still alive, still vibrant. I held it as if it were a bomb, primed and ready to explode, its very presence screaming untold secrets. A deluge of questions flooded my mind, a chaotic, overflowing river. Why had Serena hidden a phone in Clara's blanket? How long had it been there? Why had she sewn it so meticulously? And why now, after 3 years, had she decided to discard it all? My dresser drawer yielded an old charger, one I had kept, just in case. My fingers, still trembling, fumbled with the connections. I plugged it into the wall, then into the inert phone, and I waited. The seconds stretched into an eternity, my breathing shallow and uneven. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then, a flicker. A faint, almost imperceptible light bloomed in the corner of the screen. It was charging. I continued my vigil, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an agonizing suspense, until finally the screen burst to life, illuminating the dim room with its cold blue glow. The phone didn't have the password. No security code, no PIN. It simply opened directly to the main menu, as if someone had intended for it to be easily accessible, or perhaps as if they had never conceived of anyone else discovering its existence. My fingers, still trembling, hovered over the icons. There were several applications, messages, gallery, contacts, notes. I started with the gallery, a primal instinct guiding my choice. I tapped the icon, and what unfurled before my eyes froze me to the core, my blood turning to ice in my veins. The screen filled with images, dozens of them. The first was of Serena, radiant and smiling, in what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. But she wasn't alone. A man, young and undeniably handsome, sat beside her, his arm casually draped around her shoulders, his lips pressed to her cheek in an intimate gesture. A date stamp, stark and digital, appeared at the bottom of the photo. 4 years ago. 4 years ago, when Ethan was alive, when Serena was his wife, his partner, the mother of his child. Something inside me snapped, a fragile cord stretching taut and then severing with a silent, devastating force. I kept swiping, my thumb moving with a morbid compulsion. More photos. Serena and the same man on a sun-drenched beach, their bodies entwined. In a plush hotel room, his hand possessively resting on her hip. In a car, laughing, kissing, their faces alight with an illicit joy. All of them dated 4 years ago. The truth, stark and brutal, assaulted me. Serena had been having an affair. She had been cheating on Ethan, betraying his trust, his love, his entire future. And my son, my kind, trusting Ethan, had never known. He had never suspected a thing. Hot, bitter tears began to stream down my cheeks, blurring the images, each one a fresh stab to my already fractured heart. My son had loved that woman with every fibre of his being. He had built his world around her, trusted her implicitly, and she had repaid his devotion with this vile treachery. But that wasn't all. A sickening dread compelled me to continue. There were videos, several video files, neatly organized in a separate folder. My finger, hesitant but resolute, touched the first one. The screen went black, then burst to life with a home recording. The camera was stationary, perhaps resting on a piece of furniture, providing a wide shot of a living room. Ethan and Serena's living room. I recognized the plush grey sofa, the minimalist coffee table, the abstract painting that hung on the far wall. And then they appeared. Serena and the same man from the photos. They entered, laughing, Serena's lavender dress swirling around her legs. He pulled her close, his hand on her waist, and kissed her. A long, lingering embrace. They tumbled onto the sofa, their movements fluid and practiced. The scene was sickeningly clear. Too clear. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea washing over me. I stopped the video abruptly, unable to stomach another second. I felt utterly violated, consumed by a visceral disgust. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full extent of this grotesque charade. I opened the Messages app. Long threads of conversations between Serena and a contact, saved simply as J. I started reading, scrolling back through time. The earliest messages, from 4 years ago, were filled with saccharine romance, declarations of love and longing. Serena poured out her heart, telling him how desperately she loved him, how much she missed him, how she couldn't bear to be apart from him. And then, the words that twisted the knife deeper into my soul. I hate having to pretend with Ethan. Ethan. My son's name, casually dismissed, spoken of as if he were a bothersome inconvenience, an obstacle in her path to illicit happiness. The messages continued, their tone gradually shifting, becoming darker, more desperate. Serena wrote to Julian, expressing her fervent desire to be with him, to build a life together, but lamenting that Ethan would never agree to a divorce. He's too traditional, she wrote. He would never let me go. And then, a message that truly broke my soul, splintering any remaining hope that this was merely a tale of infidelity. There has to be another way. I can't keep going like this. I need him to disappear. My hands, suddenly devoid of strength, dropped the phone. It clattered softly onto the duvet. My breath hitched, caught painfully in my throat. I need him to disappear. I read the words again and again, willing them to change, to morph into something less sinister, less damning. It couldn't be true. I couldn't be reading what I thought I was reading. This was a nightmare. A horrific waking nightmare. I picked up the phone, my fingers fumbling, and continued to scroll down the conversation. Julian's reply appeared. Don't say crazy thing, just wait. We'll find a way. But Serena, consumed by a chilling desperation, insisted. Message after message, escalating in their intensity. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be with you now. Ethan is the problem. If he weren't here, we'd be free. And then, a few days later, another message. This one even more chilling, sending an icy tendril of fear snaking through my body. I talked to someone who can help us. I just need you to trust me. Julian's reply was laced with worry. What did you do? Who did you talk to? But Serena offered no details, no specifics. Only vague assurances that soon everything would be resolved, that soon they would be free, that soon they could be together without hiding. The messages ended abruptly, chillingly, just 1 week before Ethan's death. There were no more conversations after that date, as if both parties had ceased using that particular phone, perhaps believing they had successfully erased any incriminating traces. I pushed myself off the bed, stumbling blindly around the room, the walls seeming to press in on me, suffocating me with the horrifying implications of what I had just discovered. Serena had planned something. She had spoken of making Ethan disappear. And a week later, my son was dead. Had it truly been an accident? Or had it been something far, far more sinister? The doctor's words, echoing through the fog of my grief, now took on a terrifying new meaning. Severe head trauma, fall down the stairs. But now, everything converged into a single, horrifying truth. I picked up the phone again, compelled by an instinct to leave no stone unturned. I checked the notes app. There was a single entry, stark and cold, dated 2 days before Ethan's death. It read, Tuesday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He will be alone. Everything has to look natural. An accident. No one can suspect. My legs gave out beneath me, and I sank back onto the bed, a wave of gut-wrenching realization washing over me. Tears, hot and copious, streamed uncontrollably down my face. My son hadn't died in an accident. My son had been murdered. And Serena, the woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, the mother of his daughter, had been an integral part of it all. Sleep was an impossibility that night. I sat on my bed, the small black phone clutched in my hands, reading and rereading those damning messages, the chilling note. Every word was a fresh stab to my heart, every sentence a cold, undeniable confirmation of what my gut now knew, but my mind still desperately resisted. Ethan hadn't died in a tragic accident. My son had been ruthlessly murdered, and the woman who had vowed to love him until death, the woman who had feigned inconsolable grief at his funeral, had orchestrated his demise with the cold, calculated precision of a business transaction. The tears eventually stopped, replaced by a profound, hollow emptiness in my chest, a black hole that swallowed every memory, every cherished image I had ever held of Serena. It had all crumbled in a matter of hours, reduced to ashes, when the first fragile rays of dawn painted the sky. A resolute decision solidified within me. I couldn't remain silent. I couldn't allow Serena to continue living a life of normalcy, walking freely, her hands stained with my son's blood. I couldn't let her raise Clara, innocent and vulnerable, with those very hands, the same hands that had meticulously planned Ethan's murder. But I knew I couldn't face this alone. I needed help. I needed someone I could trust implicitly, someone who wouldn't dismiss my horrifying discovery as the ramblings of a grief-stricken old woman. I needed someone who would believe me. My first thought was the police. But how could I present this evidence? A phone retrieved from a dumpster, sewn into a baby blanket. The story sounded fantastical, almost insane. I needed more. I needed to unearth the entire twisted narrative. I needed to identify the man, that cryptic J from the messages. And I needed irrefutable proof that their nefarious plan had indeed come to fruition. My mind immediately turned to Beatrice Finch, my lifelong neighbour. Beatrice, 65, had been my confidant since Arthur's passing. She possessed an unparalleled capacity for listening, a steadfast loyalty, and crucially, she knew me well enough to understand that I would never concoct such a monstrous fabrication. I dialed her number, my finger unsteady on the keypad. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Eleanor, are you all right? It's 6 in the morning." I took a shaky breath. "Beatrice, I need you to come to my house. Now. It's urgent." There was a beat of silence, then the rustle of movement. "I'll be right there." She hung up. 15 minutes later, a concerned knock echoed through my silent house. I opened the door to find Beatrice, her salt and pepper hair hastily pulled into a ponytail, a mustard-coloured sweater thrown over her pajamas. Her eyes, usually sparkling with life, were wide with alarm. "Eleanor, what happened? You look terrible." I stepped aside, letting her in, and led her directly to my bedroom. The mint-green blanket lay spread across the bed, the phone still connected to its charger, a beacon of dark revelations. I began to speak, my voice surprisingly steady as I recounted everything, seeing Serena discard the blanket, my impulsive rescue, the discovery of the hidden phone, and the horrifying contents I had unearthed. Beatrice listened in rapt silence, her expression morphing from bewildered surprise to dawning horror. When I finally finished, her hands, mirroring mine, trembled as she picked up the phone. She scrolled through the photos, watched a snippet of the video, read the chilling messages, absorbed the cold, clinical note. When she finally looked up, her eyes were brimming with tears. "My God, Eleanor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. This is evidence of murder." I nodded, a fresh wave of grief washing over me. "I know, but I can't just go to the police yet. I need more proof. I need to know who that man is. I need to understand everything before I take the next step." Beatrice sat heavily on the edge of the bed, her brow furrowed in thought. "What if we check Serena's social media? Maybe that man appears in her contacts." It was a brilliant suggestion, a practical spark in the overwhelming darkness. I retrieved my laptop, opened Facebook, and searched for Serena's profile. It wasn't locked. Her digital life, a curated facade of happiness, lay open before us. Photos, posts, friends. I began reviewing her extensive contact list, a daunting scroll through hundreds of names. Beatrice leaned over my shoulder. "Look for men whose names start with J," she suggested, recalling the cryptic contact name. I filtered the search. Several names appeared: Julian, Jeremy, Jasper, Jonathan. I began opening each profile, searching for the face of the man from the incriminating photos. I clicked through Jeremy's profile, not him. Jasper, too old. Jonathan, didn't match. And then I opened Julian's profile. Julian Thorne. And there he was. The same face, the same dark eyes, the same unsettling smile that had haunted my phone screen. "It's him," I whispered, the words barely audible. Beatrice peered closer at the screen. "Are you sure?" I went back to the phone, comparing the digital images. There was no doubt. It was the same man. I returned to Julian's Facebook profile, digging deeper. Julian Thorne, 38 years old, lived in our city, worked for a construction company. His public photos, dating back years, showed him alone or with friends, busy, but conspicuously absent were any recent images with Serena. It was as if their relationship, once flaunted, had been meticulously erased from the public record. "We have to find him," I declared, my voice firm with renewed purpose. Beatrice nodded, but her gaze was cautious. "Be careful, Eleanor. If this man was involved in Ethan's death, he could be dangerous." I knew, But fear was secondary to the burning need for answers, for justice for my son. I searched for more information about Julian online, finding his LinkedIn profile. Construction supervisor, contacts with various local companies. Nothing overtly suspicious. Just a seemingly ordinary man leading a seemingly ordinary life, save for his apparent role in a cold-blooded murder. Beatrice then proposed an audacious idea, one I hadn't even considered. What if we go to Serena's house? Maybe we can find more evidence, documents, emails, something that connects everything. It was risky, incredibly so, but it made a perverse kind of sense. If Serena had been so meticulous as to hide a phone in Clara's blanket, perhaps other secrets lay concealed within the walls of that house, the house where Ethan had died. We can't just walk in, I countered, my mind already racing. We need an excuse. Beatrice thought for a moment. You could tell her you want to see Clara, that you miss your granddaughter. While you distract her, I could discreetly look around. It was far from a perfect plan, fraught with peril, but it was all we had. We decided to attempt it that very afternoon. I sent Serena a text message, trying to inject a desperate plea into the sterile format. Hi, Serena. I know I've been persistent, but I really miss Clara. Can I stop by to see her this afternoon just for a little while? 20 minutes crawled by before her reply arrived. Hi, Eleanor. Today's not a good day. Clara's a little cranky. Maybe another day. I gritted my teeth. It was the same old song and dance, the same endless stream of excuses. But this time, I wasn't taking no for an answer. Please, Serena. Just a few minutes. I bought her a present. I want to give it to her in person. Another agonizing silence, then her terse reply. Fine, but only 30 minutes. I have things to do. It was all I needed. Beatrice and I prepared, a silent, grim determination setting in. She would wait in the car, a silent accomplice, until I gave her the signal. If I could successfully distract Serena long enough, Beatrice would enter, concocting some plausible excuse. Together we would search for anything that could serve as additional evidence, any fragment that could strengthen our burgeoning case. At 3 o'clock, we arrived at Serena's house, a pristine 2-story structure of white paint and an immaculately kept garden. The very house where Ethan had died, where he had supposedly tumbled down the stairs, where his life had been so brutally cut short. My heart hammered against my ribs as I rang the doorbell, a frantic rhythm that threatened to leap from my chest. Footsteps approached, and the door opened. Serena stood there, dressed in sleek black trousers and a salmon-coloured blouse, her blonde hair impeccably styled, her makeup flawless as always. Hi, Eleanor, she said, a brittle, cold smile playing on her lips. Come in. The air inside was heavy with the scent of lavender, a cloying sweetness that felt at odds with the chilling revelations I carried. Everything was meticulously clean, perfectly ordered, almost disturbingly so, as if no tragedy had ever stained these pristine walls. Where's Clara? I asked, my voice betraying none of the turmoil within me. Upstairs in her room. I'll call her. Serena ascended the stairs, the very stairs where Ethan had supposedly fallen. My eyes followed her every movement, searching for any sign, any lingering mark, any subtle imperfection. But there was nothing. Serena reappeared moments later, Clara cradled in her arms. My granddaughter had grown so much. She was 3 years old now, her dark hair falling in soft curls over her shoulders, her eyes identical to Ethan's, large and luminous. Seeing her, so innocent and unaware, simultaneously broke my heart and filled it with a fierce, protective love. Hi, Grandma, Clara chirped, her sweet voice a balm to my raw nerves. She extended her little arms toward me, and I gathered her into my embrace, hugging her tightly. She smelled of baby shampoo and pure innocence, the only untainted thing left of my son, the sole beacon of goodness that had survived this pervasive darkness. "I missed you so much, my love," I whispered, pressing a kiss to her soft hair. She smiled, holding up a small, worn brown teddy bear, and began to weave an elaborate story about him. I listened, my attention divided, discreetly watching Serena from the corner of my eye. Serena stood by the window, engrossed in her phone, her expression distracted, almost nervous, as if she were waiting for something or someone. Seizing the opportune moment, I pulled out my own phone and sent a quick coded message to Beatrice. "Come in now." A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Serena looked up, startled, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked, feigning casualness with a voice I barely recognized as my own. She shook her head, a frown creasing her brow, and went to the door. She opened it to reveal Beatrice, her face composed in a kindly smile. "Hello. Excuse the interruption. I'm Beatrice, Eleanor's neighbor. I came with her, but I forgot a bag in the car. Can I come in and use the restroom? It's urgent." Serena hesitated, her gaze darting between Beatrice and me. I offered a reassuring nod, as if this were the most normal occurrence in the world. "Sure," Serena finally conceded, her voice clipped. Down the hall, first door on the left, Beatrice entered, giving me a quick, almost imperceptible glance. I understood the message. She would search for what she could, while I kept Serena thoroughly distracted. I needed time. I launched into conversation, asking Serena about her work, how she was managing with Clara, if she ever needed help. Serena responded with curt, monosyllabic phrases, her eyes constantly flicking back to her phone, her restlessness palpable. I persevered, mentioning I had found some old photographs of Ethan, musing aloud how lovely it would be to show them to Clara when she was older, so she could truly know her father. At the mention of Ethan, Serena visibly tensed. "Yes, of course, when she's older," her voice suddenly sharper, harsher. She glanced pointedly down the hallway. "Your friend is taking a long time. Perhaps she isn't feeling well." I improvised, a nervous tremor dancing in my stomach. "You know, at our age, everything takes a little longer." Serena didn't look convinced. She rose from her seat. "I'm going to check on her." My heart hammered. I had to stop her. "Wait, Serena," I said, my voice urgent. "There's something I want to ask you." She paused, turning to face me, her expression guarded. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, needing to make this believable, innocuous. "Clara's baby blanket. The mint green one I knitted for her. I haven't seen it lately. Are you still using it?" For a fleeting second, panic flickered in her eyes, raw and unmistakable. Then, with an almost terrifying speed, she composed herself, her features smoothing into a mask of placid indifference. "The blanket? Oh, yes, of course. It's in the washing machine. It got quite dirty." She was lying. I knew it with an absolute, searing certainty, but I couldn't call her out. Not yet. "Oh, that's good," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm glad you still have it. Ethan loved it so much." I emphasized my son's name again, deliberately provoking a reaction. Serena pressed her lips into a thin, tight line. "Yes, Ethan loved a lot of things." There was something in her tone, something bitter, resentful, that sent another shiver down my spine. Before I could formulate a reply, Beatrice appeared in the hallway, her stride brisk, her face serene. "Sorry for the delay. I feel much better now." Serena's gaze was narrowed, suspicious, but Beatrice simply walked towards me, gently touching my shoulder. It was the signal. She had found something. We needed to leave. "Well, Serena," I said, rising stiffly, "we won't bother you any longer. Thank you for letting us see Clara." I kissed my granddaughter's forehead, pressing a fervent, silent prayer into her soft skin. "I love you, little one. Grandma will be back soon." Clara hugged me tightly, whispering, "Bye, Grandma." Serena escorted us to the door, her smile brittle, her eyes still holding that faint, calculating gleam. When we stepped outside, she closed the door quickly, almost violently, the sound echoing ominously behind us. Beatrice and I walked to the car in silence, the tension between us a palpable, almost suffocating presence. Once inside, the doors securely locked, I turned to her, my voice barely a whisper. "What did you find?" Beatrice reached into her purse, pulling out a manila envelope. It was in her bedroom, in the closet, hidden under some boxes. My hands shook as I took the envelope, tearing it open. Inside were documents, pages detailing Ethan's life insurance policy. My son had been insured for $500,000, and the sole beneficiary was Serena. The entire amount had been collected 3 months after his death. Then, bank statements, large transfers, one for $200,000, directed to an account in the name of Julian Thorne. "My God," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. She paid him. She paid him to help her kill Ethan. Beatrice nodded, her face grim. "There's more." She produced another paper, a copy of a birth certificate. Clara's. But something was profoundly wrong. The mother's name wasn't Serena Hayes. It stated, Lydia Torres. "Who is Lydia Torres?" I asked, a fresh wave of confusion and alarm washing over me. Beatrice shook her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know, but according to this document, she's Clara's biological mother, not Serena." The world stopped. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile this impossible revelation. Clara wasn't Serena's daughter, but Serena had been pregnant. I had seen her. We all had. Beatrice pointed to the date of birth on the certificate. "Look at Clara's date of birth. It doesn't match what Serena told us. There's a difference of 2 months. I snatched the certificate, my eyes scanning the dates. Beatrice was right. According to this document, Clara had been born months before Serena had announced her own pregnancy. "This doesn't make sense," I murmured, my voice a strangled sound. Did Serena fake a pregnancy? Did she steal a baby? "I don't know," Beatrice said, her voice heavy with the enormity of our discovery. "But we need to find Lydia Torres. She's the key to all of this." Back at my house, Beatrice and I spread all the documents across my living room table. The phone, the photos, the messages, the insurance papers, the birth certificate. The pieces of this grotesque puzzle were slowly, horrifyingly beginning to fit together. Serena had planned Ethan's murder to claim the insurance money. She had enlisted Julian Thorne, paying him handsomely from the proceeds. But there was another story, a darker, more intricate web of deceit. The story of Lydia Torres and Clara. "We need to search for information about Lydia," I said, my voice imbued with a newfound urgency. I opened my laptop, typing her name into the search bar. Lydia Torres. Several profiles appeared, but none seemed to fit. I added the city to the search criteria. And then I found something, a local newspaper article from 4 years ago. The headline screamed, "Young mother missing, family asks for help, locating Lydia Torres." There was a photo, a 23-year-old girl, long dark hair framing sad, vulnerable eyes. According to the article, she had disappeared, leaving behind her 2-month-old baby. "Clara," I whispered, a sickening realization dawning. Lydia disappeared and left Clara. Beatrice, reading over my shoulder, completed the chilling thought. Or maybe she didn't leave her. Maybe Serena made her disappear. The idea sent a fresh wave of ice through my blood. "Do you think Serena killed Lydia too?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Beatrice replied, her face pale. "But think about it. Serena needed a baby to complete her perfect family facade with Ethan. Maybe she met Lydia, took advantage of her vulnerability, and then, when she no longer needed her, she simply got rid of her." It was a horrific theory, but in the twisted logic of Serena's actions, it made a terrifying amount of sense. I searched for more information about Lydia's disappearance. Another article, more recent, from 6 months ago, appeared on the screen. Remains of missing young woman found, identified as Lydia Torres. Her body had been discovered in an abandoned lot outside the city. The investigation had been closed. Cause of death, head trauma, the same cause of death as Ethan. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Serena killed her," I said, my voice trembling with a raw blend of horror and dawning fury. "She killed Lydia to keep Clara, and then she killed Ethan to keep the money." Beatrice took my hand, her grip firm. "Eleanor, this is too big. We need to go to the police, now." She was right. We couldn't continue this dangerous investigation alone. This was evidence of 2 murders, possibly more. We needed professional help. I picked up my phone, my fingers dialing the number for the local precinct. A masculine voice answered. "Central Precinct, how can I help you?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I need to report a murder, 2 murders, and I have evidence." They gave me an appointment for the next day. A detective named Harding would take the case. They instructed me to bring every piece of evidence I had. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, the terrifying mosaic of my discoveries replaying endlessly in my mind. Serena's insidious lies, Ethan's brutal death, the tragic fate of Lydia Torres, and the innocent child at the heart of it all, Clara, my granddaughter. She wasn't my biological blood granddaughter, but in that moment, it didn't matter. She was Ethan's daughter, in his heart, in his love. He had loved her as his own, cherished her, protected her. And now that precious child was in the hands of a cold-blooded murderer, the woman who had killed her real mother and her adoptive father. I couldn't allow Serena to continue with her. I had to get Clara out of that house. I had to protect her. But first, I needed the police to believe my unbelievable story. I needed them to investigate, to arrest Serena, to deliver justice for the dead. At 9 the next morning, Beatrice and I arrived at the precinct. It was a grey, imposing building, the air inside smelling faintly of old coffee and stale paper. A receptionist greeted us, and we explained we had an appointment with Detective Harding. She directed us to a small waiting room where the silence was punctuated only by the distant murmur of voices. 15 minutes later, a man appeared. He was in his mid-40s, tall, with short greying hair at the temples and piercing, intelligent eyes. He wore a beige shirt and dark trousers, his demeanour serious, but not unkind. "Mrs. Vance," he said, extending a hand. I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm Detective Harding. Come in, please." He led us to his office, a cramped room overflowing with filing cabinets and stacks of folders. Photographs, presumably of solved cases, adorned the walls. We sat down opposite his desk, and he settled into his chair, pulling out a notepad. "Tell me everything from the beginning. I took a deep, fortifying breath, and I began to speak. I recounted Ethan's death, Serena's supposed grief, the discarded blanket, the hidden phone, the damning photos, the chilling messages, the videos, the cold, calculating note about the accident. I presented everything: the phone, the life insurance documents, the bank transfers to Julian Thorne, Clara's birth certificate bearing Lydia Torres's name, the newspaper articles detailing Lydia's disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her body. Detective Harding listened in silence, his expression unreadable, meticulously taking notes, carefully reviewing each document. He scrutinized the photos on the phone, reading the messages with an intense concentration. When I finally finished, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on me. "This is serious," he finally said, his voice grave. "Very serious. If what you are telling me is true, we are talking about 2 premeditated homicides, possibly 3, if we count the girl's biological father." I was stunned. The biological father? If Clara wasn't Serena's daughter, she had to have a father, someone who was with Lydia Torres. "Do you know anything about him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I shook my head. "I didn't find anything about that." The detective jotted something down. "I'll investigate. But first, I need to verify this evidence." "What are you going to do?" I asked, my heart hammering with a fragile hope. "I'm going to reopen the case of your son's death," Detective Harding stated, his voice firm. "I'm going to request an exhumation for a second autopsy, and I'm going to thoroughly investigate the death of Lydia Torres. I'm also going to interrogate Julian Thorne." An immense relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. Finally, someone believed me. Someone was going to act. "And Serena, are you going to arrest her?" The detective shook his head. "Not yet. I need more evidence before issuing an arrest warrant. I don't want her to escape if she suspects we're investigating her." It made sense, a frustrating, agonizing sense. "And in the meantime, Clara is still with her," I said, the desperate plea escaping my lips. The detective looked at me with compassion. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Vance, but legally Serena is the girl's guardian. I can't take her away without a court order, and for that, I need solid proof." "Isn't the phone enough?" I pressed, gesturing towards the damning device. The detective sighed. "It is important evidence, but a good lawyer could argue that it was planted, that we don't know for sure where it came from. I need more. I need testimonies, forensic evidence, clear connections." I felt utterly helpless, a leaden weight settling in my stomach. "How long will all this take?" Beatrice asked, her voice reflecting my own anxiety. The detective shrugged, a gesture of weary resignation. "It depends. If I find what I'm looking for, maybe a couple of weeks. If not, it could take months." Months. I didn't have months. I couldn't leave Clara in Serena's custody for that long, not now that I knew the truth. "There's something else," I interjected, recalling Serena's nervous demeanor during our visit. "Serena was nervous yesterday. She was constantly looking at her phone, as if she was waiting for something or planning something." The detective wrote that down too. "Do you have any idea what it could be?" I shook my head. "No, but it gave me a bad feeling." "All right," he said, his expression hardening. "I'm going to put discreet surveillance on her house. If she tries anything, we'll know." That calmed me, marginally. At least they would be watching her. At least they would know if she attempted to flee, or, God forbid, to hurt Clara. We said our goodbyes to the detective, and he gave us his personal number. "Call me if you notice anything strange. Anything, no matter what time it is." I nodded, my mind reeling. Beatrice and I left the precinct, the midday sun high and hot, but I felt a chilling cold deep inside. "What do we do now?" Beatrice asked, her voice subdued. "Wait," I said bitterly. "Wait and pray that they find enough to arrest her." The following days were a torment of anxious anticipation. Every hour stretched into an eternity. I couldn't stop thinking about Clara, about her safety, about whether Serena suspected anything, about whether she would try to escape. Detective Harding called me every couple of days, providing brief updates. He had interrogated Julian Thorne. At first, Julian denied everything, claiming he barely knew Serena, that they were merely work acquaintances. But when confronted with the irrefutable evidence from the phone, the photos, the messages, he broke down. He confessed to the affair. He admitted that Serena had indeed spoken to him about getting rid of Ethan, but he vehemently swore he never agreed, that he had told her she was crazy, that he wanted no part of such a scheme. However, the bank transfers told a different story. The detective pressured him, showing him the statements. The $200,000 Serena had transferred to his account 3 months after Ethan's death. Julian couldn't explain it convincingly. He claimed it was a loan, that Serena had given it to him to start a business, but he had no documents, no proof. "I'm holding him for 24 hours, the detective told me. "I hope he confesses. If not, I'll have to release him. I don't have enough to keep him detained." That night, Julian asked for a lawyer and stopped talking. Detective Harding had no choice but to release him, but the investigation continued. They exhumed Ethan's body. The second autopsy revealed something the first, performed in the immediate aftermath of his supposed accident, had tragically missed. There were unmistakable signs of a struggle on his wrists, faint bruises that indicated someone had restrained him. It hadn't been an accidental fall. It was murder. "Your son was restrained and pushed down those stairs, Mrs. Vance," the detective confirmed, his voice gentle but firm. Tears streamed down my face, an agonizing mix of grief and profound, bitter vindication. Knowing the truth was excruciatingly painful, but it was also necessary. Ethan deserved justice. They also investigated Lydia Torres's death more thoroughly. They discovered that the land where her body had been found belonged to a construction company, the very company where Julian Thorne had worked as a supervisor. The connection was undeniable, chillingly clear. Julian had had access to that secluded location. He could have easily taken the body there, buried it, ensuring no one would suspect. Furthermore, they checked Clara's adoption records. There were none. Legally, Clara was still registered as the biological daughter of Serena and Ethan, but the original birth certificate, the one Beatrice had found, told a different story. Someone had meticulously falsified documents. Someone had deliberately erased Lydia's trace. "We are building the case, Mrs. Vance," Detective Harding told me, his voice resolute. "Little by little, every piece fits. Soon we will have enough to arrest her." 1 more week passed, a week of agonizing anguish, of suffocating fear, of sleepless nights haunted by the faces of the dead. And then, one early morning, my phone rang. It was Detective Harding. His voice was urgent, devoid of his usual calm. "Mrs. Vance, I need you to come to the precinct now. It's about Serena." My heart stopped, a cold dread seizing me. What happened? There was a beat of silence. "She tried to flee. We intercepted her at the airport. She had tickets for herself and for Clara. They were going to leave the country." I dressed in 5 minutes, my hands clumsy with haste. Beatrice was already at my door, ready to accompany me. We arrived at the precinct, and the detective was waiting for us. He led us to an observation room. Through a thick glass window, I saw Serena, She was sitting in a chair, handcuffed, her perfect makeup smeared, her usually immaculate hair disheveled. She looked for the first time truly exposed, truly vulnerable. "We arrested her 2 hours ago," Detective Harding explained, his voice low. "When she tried to go through airport security, our alert system was activated. She had fake passports for herself and the girl, and $500,000 in cash, divided into several suitcases." "Where is Clara?" I asked desperately, my gaze fixed on Serena's defiant figure. "She's with social services," the detective reassured me. "She's fine. Scared, but fine. They're going to need you to go and identify yourself as her grandmother to see if she can stay with you temporarily while we resolve all this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Clara was safe, away from Serena, and I could have her with me, protect her as I should have done from the very beginning. "I want to see her now," I said, my voice thick with emotion. The detective nodded. "Of course. But first, I need you to see this." He showed me a recording from the interrogation room. Serena sat across from another detective, her arms crossed, her jaw tense. "I have nothing to say. I want a lawyer." The detective interrogating her didn't flinch. "He's on his way. But in the meantime, why don't you explain to me why you were trying to flee the country with $500,000 in cash?" Serena didn't answer, merely staring at the table. The detective continued, his voice calm but firm. "We have evidence, Serena. Messages, photos, bank transfers. We know about Julian. We know about Lydia. We know about Ethan. Everything." At the mention of Ethan's name, Serena finally looked up, her eyes flashing with something dark and dangerous. "You don't know anything," she said, her voice chillingly cold. "You can't prove anything." The detective smiled, a slow, humorless curve of his lips. "Oh no. We have the phone you hid in Clara's blanket. The same one you threw in the trash, thinking no one would find it. We have the messages where you plan to murder your husband. We have the transfers to Julian Thorne." Serena turned pale, a visible tremor passing through her. "That phone. How?" She stopped herself, realizing she had said too much. The detective leaned forward, his voice a quiet menace. "Your mother-in-law found it. Eleanor Vance. The woman from whom you snatched her son. The woman who is now going to keep Clara while you rot in prison." Serena's expression contorted from panic to a raw, unadulterated fury. "That meddling old woman. I knew I shouldn't have let her near the girl. I knew she was snooping. That's why I wanted to leave. That's why I needed to disappear before it was too late." "Disappear?" the detective pressed, his voice sharp. "How did you make Lydia Torres disappear?" The name dropped like a bomb. Serena fell silent, her breathing ragged and shallow. "I don't know who you're talking about." The detective took out a photo, placing it on the table. It was Lydia, young, smiling, alive. Lydia Torres, Clara's real mother, the girl who disappeared 4 years ago. The same one we found dead in a lot that belongs to the company where your accomplice, Julian, worked. Serena closed her eyes, her face a mask of defeat. "I want a lawyer. I'm not going to say anything else." The detective leaned back, his gaze unwavering. "Suit yourself. But this isn't going to disappear. We have enough to convict you for double homicide, for fraud, for falsification of documents. You are going to spend the rest of your life in prison." The recording ended. Detective Harding looked at me. "She still won't confess, but she will. The evidence is overwhelming." "What's going to happen to Julian?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "We've arrested him too. He's in another room. And he is talking. He's blaming Serena for everything. the detective continued, opening his notepad. He says she manipulated him, that he was just following orders, that he was afraid of her. I wasn't surprised. Cowards always look out for themselves. Tell me what else, Julian said. According to Julian, Detective Harding began, Serena contacted him 4 years ago. They were already having an affair. She told him she was tired of her marriage, that Ethan was boring, controlling, that she wanted a different life. She proposed the plan. Wait until Ethan was alone at home, push him down the stairs, make it look like an accident. In exchange, they would share the life insurance money. My stomach churned, a bitter bile rising in my throat. Hearing the cold, clinical details of my son's murder, laid bare by his accomplice, was almost unbearable. Julian says that at first he refused, but Serena convinced him. She showed him the insurance papers, $500,000. She promised him $200,000 for himself and a life together after everything was over. Beatrice, who had remained silent throughout the interrogation playback, finally spoke, her voice laced with a raw tremor. What about Lydia? What did Julian say about her? The detective turned a page in his notepad, his expression grim. That's where the story gets darker. According to Julian, Serena met Lydia at the hospital where she worked. Lydia was a patient, admitted for pregnancy complications. She was alone. No family, no resources. Serena saw an opportunity. She befriended Lydia, offered her help, even suggested Lydia could stay at her house after the baby was born. Lydia, desperate and vulnerable, accepted. She had no one else. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. Serena planned everything from the beginning. She wanted to keep the baby. The detective nodded. Exactly. According to Julian, Serena lied to Ethan. She told him she was pregnant, wore loose clothing, faked symptoms. Ethan, blindly in love, never suspected. And Lydia? My voice trembled. What happened to her? The detective took a deep breath. Julian says Serena gave her something, a drug to incapacitate her. Then she took her to the lot where they later found her body, and she killed her. Same method as with Ethan. Head trauma. Tears ran uncontrollably down my face, blurring the sterile walls of the observation room. Serena wasn't just a murderer. She was a monster. She had killed a defenseless girl, stolen her baby. And then she had killed my son to keep his money. And Clara's father, I asked. The real father. According to the records we found, Lydia never registered the father, the detective replied. Either she didn't know him, or she didn't want to involve him. We are investigating, but for now there's no trace of him. I wiped my tears, the urgency to see Clara now paramount. I want to see Clara, please. The detective led me to another wing of the building. There was a waiting room, bright and surprisingly cheerful, filled with colourful toys. A social worker sat there, and in a corner, playing quietly with coloured blocks, was my granddaughter. Clara, I whispered, her name a fragile prayer on my lips. She looked up, her dark eyes, so like Ethan's, widened in recognition. And then she was running towards me, her small arms outstretched. Grandma! I picked her up, squeezing her against my chest, burying my face in her soft hair. She clung to me, small and trembling. She was scared, confused, but she was safe. I'm here, my love, I whispered, tears silently soaking her hair. Everything is going to be all right. The social worker, a kind-faced woman named Ms. Olson, approached us. Mrs. Vance, I'm Mary Olson. I work with Child Protective Services. Detective Harding has explained the situation. We're going to need to do an evaluation before letting Clara go with you, but everything indicates that it's what's best for the child. I will do whatever is necessary, I said, my voice firm despite the tears. I just want to take care of her, protect her. Miss Olsen smiled warmly. I know, and I see that she loves you. That is important. I spent the next few hours with Clara. We talked, mostly about her toys and what she had eaten. I gently explained that she would be staying with me for a while. I didn't tell her about Serena. Not yet. She was too small to understand the enormity of such a truth. I would explain everything to her later when she was older, when she could process the complexities and the horrors. For now, she just needed to feel loved and safe. Ms. Olsen conducted the evaluations, asking questions about my health, my finances, my support network. Beatrice was there the whole time, a silent pillar of strength and support. At the end of the day, Ms. Olsen gave her approval. Clara can stay with you temporarily. There will be follow-up visits and eventually a hearing to determine permanent custody. But for now, you are her legal guardian. I signed all the necessary papers, my hand steady this time. I took Clara's small hand in mine, and we left that building. Beatrice drove us home, and the whole way, Clara slept peacefully in my lap, her breathing soft and tranquil. When we arrived at my house, I carried her to my bedroom and gently placed her on my bed. I covered her with a soft, clean blanket, and then I sat beside her, watching her sleep. She looked so much like Ethan, those same eyes, that same gentle curve of her nose. Though she didn't share his blood, she was his daughter in every way that truly mattered. I promise I will protect you, I whispered to her sleeping form. No one will ever hurt you again. Your dad would have wanted you to be safe, and I will make sure that is the case. Beatrice came into the room, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. You did it, Eleanor. You saved that child. I shook my head. No, I just did what any grandmother would do, what I should have done from the beginning. Beatrice sat down beside me. Don't blame yourself. You couldn't have known what Serena was capable of. Maybe she was right, but the guilt still gnawed at me. If only I had been more attentive, questioned more, trusted less, maybe Ethan would still be alive. Maybe Lydia, too. What's going to happen now? Beatrice asked, breaking the silence. Detective Harding is going to keep building the case. There will be trials, testimonies. It's going to be a long process, but Serena is going to pay for what she did. And Julian, too. Beatrice nodded. Good. They deserve it. The following months were a dizzying whirlwind of legal proceedings and media frenzy. The case of Serena Hayes and Julian Thorne exploded across national news, a lurid sensation. Newspapers screamed headlines about the killer nurse, the woman who had murdered her husband and stolen a child for money. Television cameras camped outside the precinct and the courthouse. Whenever there was a hearing, eager for any scrap of information. I did my utmost to shield Clara from the relentless glare of publicity, creating a cocoon of normalcy and love around her. I enrolled her in preschool, bought her new clothes and toys, and meticulously transformed a spare room in my house into her own sanctuary. I painted the walls a soothing yellow, filled it with stuffed animals and storybooks, determined that she feel utterly at home, safe from the horrors she had unknowingly endured. But the nights were difficult. Clara, though too young to articulate her trauma, had nightmares. She would wake crying, whimpering for her mummy. And I, with a heavy heart, didn't know what to tell her. How could I explain that her mummy was in prison, that she had murdered her daddy, that she wasn't even her real mother? I simply held her, sang soft lullabies, and whispered endless reassurances that she was safe, that I would always take care of her. Slowly, gradually, the nightmares became less frequent. Clara began to smile more often, to play with an unburdened joy, to simply be a normal, thriving child. That gave me hope. That gave me everything. Detective Harding kept me rigorously informed about the case's progression. Julian Thorne, after facing the overwhelming evidence and the pressure of a potential life sentence, accepted a plea deal. He would testify against Serena in exchange for a reduced sentence, 25 years instead of life. It angered me, the thought of him receiving leniency after his complicity, but I understood that his testimony was absolutely crucial to securing Serena's conviction. Serena, predictably, refused to plead guilty. Her high-powered lawyer argued that all the evidence was purely circumstantial, that there was no direct proof she had committed the murders, that Julian was simply lying to save his own skin. But the prosecution had built an unshakable case. The phone with its damning messages, photos and videos, the bank transfers, Julian's testimony, the irrefutable forensic evidence from Ethan's second autopsy. Everything pointed, inexorably, to Serena. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. One afternoon, while Clara was taking her nap, I received an unexpected call. It was Detective Harding. His voice was serious, more grave than usual, a new edge of urgency that sent a prickle of unease down my spine. "Mrs. Vance, I need you to come to the precinct. There is something you need to see." "What happened?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I prefer to explain it to you in person. Can you come this afternoon?" I agreed immediately. I asked Beatrice to watch Clara, and I made my way to the precinct. The detective was waiting for me in his office, a fresh folder resting ominously on his desk. "Please, sit down." I sat, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. He opened the folder, retrieving several photographs. They were crime scene images. One depicted the overgrown lot where Lydia's body had been found. Another showed the fateful staircase in Ethan and Serena's home. "Remember I told you we were investigating Clara's biological father?" he began, his voice low. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Yes, you said there was no record." "Correct," he continued. "Lydia never put the father's name on the birth certificate, but we kept investigating. We talked to Lydia's former co-workers, friends, neighbors, and we found something interesting. Several witnesses mentioned that Lydia was dating someone, a man who worked at the hospital, the same hospital where Ethan and Serena worked." My stomach tightened, a knot of dread forming. "Who was he?" The detective took out another photograph, a hospital ID badge. A man in his early 30s, dark hair, light eyes. And then I saw it. The resemblance. It was unsettling, uncanny. "That man," the detective said, his voice flat, "was named Leo Maxwell. He was a lab technician. And according to several testimonies, he and Lydia had a relationship." "Where is he now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The detective looked down at his desk. "He died 3.5 years ago, 6 months after Lydia's disappearance." A chill snaked through my body, cold and profound. "Another accident," I murmured, the words heavy with dawning horror. The detective nodded. "Exactly. Car accident. He lost control of his car on a lonely highway, fell down a ravine, died instantly. And guess who reported the accident? Who was the first to arrive at the scene?" I didn't need him to tell me. I already knew, a sickening certainty. "Serena." The detective placed another photo on the table. "Serena was on duty that night. She claimed she was on her way home when she saw Leo's car go off the road. She called emergency services, but by the time they arrived, Leo was already dead." We believe she killed him too." Detective Harding took a deep, weary breath. "We have no proof. The case was closed as an accident. But now, with everything we know, we are reopening the investigation. There are too many coincidences. First Lydia disappears, then Leo dies, then Ethan dies, all connected somehow, all dead in circumstances that Serena could have manipulated." My hands were trembling, my mind reeling. How many people did she kill? How many lives did she destroy? The detective closed the folder, his expression grim. "I don't know yet, Mrs. Vance, but we're going to find out. I'm going to review every case, every suspicious death connected to Serena in the last 5 years. If there are more victims, we will find them." I left the precinct in a state of profound shock. Serena wasn't just a murderer. She was a serial killer, meticulous, calculating, devoid of any discernible humanity. She had eliminated anyone who stood in her way. Lydia, because she carried the baby Serena coveted. Leo, because he was the baby's father and could claim her. Ethan, because he possessed the money she desired. I returned home, finding Beatrice waiting anxiously in the living room. "What happened? You look pale," she said, her concern evident. I told her everything about Leo, about the terrifying possibility of even more victims. Beatrice gasped, her hands flying to cover her mouth. "My God, it's worse than we thought." I couldn't sleep that night, tormented by the endless parade of Serena's victims. Lydia, Leo, Ethan. How many others? How much pain had she caused? And how had I been so blind, so close to her for years, without ever truly seeing the monster lurking beneath the polished veneer? The next morning, Detective Harding appeared at my house unannounced, his expression even more somber. He had more news. "We found something else. We checked the medical records at the hospital where Serena worked. There were 3 suspicious deaths of patients under her care in the last 4 years. All were elderly. All died of cardiac arrest. At the time, nothing was suspected. It was attributed to complications of old age. But now, we are exhuming the bodies, looking for traces of medication that could have induced the arrests." I felt dizzy, my head swimming. "Are you saying Serena killed her own patients?" The detective nodded, his jaw tight. "It's a strong possibility. If the analyses confirm that they were poisoned, then we would be talking about at least 6 victims, possibly more. Why would she do it? What did she gain by killing those elderly people?" The detective produced another folder, placing it on my coffee table. Money. It was always about money. 2 of those patients modified their wills shortly before they died. They left significant donations to the hospital. Serena had been very kind to them, very attentive. She gained their trust. And then, mysteriously, the money from those donations disappeared. It never reached the hospital. It was diverted to phantom bank accounts. We are tracking those accounts, and all of them have a connection with Serena or with Julian. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Serena had constructed a chilling, criminal empire. She had killed, stolen, lied, and all with that perfect smile, those elegant dresses, her facade of polished professionalism. No one had suspected. No one until I had found that phone. "There's something else," the detective continued. "Julian is cooperating more than expected. He says Serena has hidden documents, evidence she kept as insurance in case Julian ever betrayed her. She wanted to have something to threaten him with." "What kind of documents?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The detective leaned forward. "Bank records, contracts, even videos. Julian says Serena recorded him helping her with Ethan's murder, that she has those recordings hidden somewhere." Where? The detective shook his head. Julian says he doesn't know, that Serena never told him. But he thinks they might be in her house, in some hiding place only she knows about. My mind raced, a sudden, fierce clarity cutting through the shock. We need those documents. If they exist, they could seal the case against her. The detective nodded. We already have a search warrant. We are going to search the house from top to bottom, every corner, every wall, until we find what we are looking for. That afternoon, a team of police officers descended upon Serena's house. I accompanied them. I needed to be there. I needed to witness them dismantle her perfect, grotesque life, piece by painstaking piece. They searched everything. The drawers, the closets, they lifted rugs, they tapped on walls, listening for hollow sounds, searching for hidden compartments. And after 4 grueling hours, one of the officers yelled from the basement, "Detective, I found something!" We all ran down. The officer had moved an old bookshelf, revealing a safe built into the wall, small and discreet, almost perfectly camouflaged. "We need to open it," Detective Harding said, his voice taut with anticipation. A specialist was brought in, and within 20 minutes, the safe yielded its secrets. Inside, we found a veritable treasure trove of evidence: external hard drives, USB drives, folders bursting with documents, printed photographs. Everything was meticulously organized, every file labeled, every document in its designated place. It was Serena's personal archive, her chilling record of crimes. "It's as if she wanted to remember everything," the detective murmured, reviewing the documents. "As if she was proud of what she had done." Among the files were videos. Videos of Serena and Julian planning Ethan's murder. Videos of Serena speaking directly to the camera, confessing everything, documenting her crimes for posterity, as if she believed she would never be caught, or perhaps, perversely, wanted her legacy to be known. In one of the videos, Serena spoke with a terrifying calm, her voice cold, utterly devoid of emotion. "If anyone is watching this, it means I made a mistake, that I got caught. But I want you to know that I don't regret anything. I did what I had to do. I eliminated obstacles. I took what I deserved. Ethan was weak. Lydia was a means to an end. Leo was a risk. The elderly were opportunities. I feel no remorse. I just did what no one else had the courage to do." The video ended. Detective Harding turned off the screen. "With this," he said, his voice resolute, "her case is closed. She is going to spend the rest of her life in prison." The trial began 2 months later. The courtroom was packed, a sea of journalists, curious onlookers, and the silently grieving family members of the victims Serena had left in her wake. I sat in the front row, my gaze fixed on the double doors, my heart a mixture of trepidation and grim resolve. I wanted to look her in the eyes. I wanted her to know that she hadn't won, that the truth, no matter how ugly, had finally come to light. Serena entered, handcuffed, her dark grey suit stark against her pale skin. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her face devoid of makeup. She looked different, smaller, more real, stripped of her carefully constructed artifice. She was no longer the perfect woman everyone had once known. She was simply a criminal, facing the devastating consequences of her actions. Our eyes met across the courtroom. For a second, I saw something flicker in their depths. It wasn't regret. It was rage, raw, undiluted fury that she had been caught, that her perfect, intricate plan had ultimately collapsed. She looked away, her jaw clenching, and sat down next to her lawyer. The trial began. The prosecutor, a formidable woman in her 40s, firm and direct, presented the case with meticulous precision. She displayed the photos, the chilling messages from the phone, the damning videos retrieved from the safe, the irrefutable forensic testimonies. Every piece of evidence was a fresh nail in Serena's coffin. Julian Thorne testified. He entered the courtroom in shackles, looking broken, gaunt, a shadow of the handsome man in the photographs. He began to speak in a trembling voice, recounting how Serena had seduced him, how she had proposed the heinous plan, how they had waited until Ethan was alone. "I held his arms," Julian confessed, his voice choked with emotion. "Serena pushed him. I saw him fall down the stairs. I heard the thud of his head against the floor. And I didn't do anything. I just stood there while she called emergency services, faking panic." Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. Hearing the precise, agonizing details of my son's death was heartbreaking, an unbearable torment. But I needed to hear it. I needed to know exactly what they had done to him. Julian continued, his voice gaining a fragile strength as he unburdened himself. He spoke of Lydia, of how Serena had asked him for help to get rid of her. Serena gave her something, a drug. Lydia became unconscious. I took her to the lot. Serena hit her head with a rock. Then we buried her. The whole thing took less than an hour. The courtroom was plunged into a stunned silence, broken only by the collective, horrified gasps of the onlookers. People were aghast. Julian also spoke of Leo. Serena followed him that night. She waited until he reached the lonely road. She rammed him with her own car, pushing him off the road. Then she reported the accident as if she had just passed by. No one suspected. Serena's lawyer attempted to discredit Julian, his voice booming across the courtroom. "You are lying to reduce your sentence. You are blaming my client for everything to save yourself." But Julian did not retract. "I am not lying," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "I have to live with this for the rest of my life. The least I can do is tell the truth." Then came the forensic experts. They explained the results of the autopsies, the defensive marks on Ethan's wrists, the specific type of head trauma Lydia and Leo had suffered, the traces of medications found in the bodies of the elderly patients from the hospital. Every scientific detail confirmed Julian's version of events. Former co-workers testified, patients who had survived Serena's care, neighbors who had observed strange things. Every testimony added another layer to the chilling narrative, another irrefutable proof of Serena's cold, calculating evil. The trial lasted 3 harrowing weeks. Finally, the time for closing arguments arrived. The prosecutor stood before the jury, her voice ringing with conviction. "Serena Hayes is not a person who made a mistake. She is not someone who acted on impulse. She is a predator, calculating, cold. She killed at least 6 people, possibly more. And she did it without remorse. She destroyed families. She ruined lives. She stole a baby from her real mother. She murdered her own husband, and all for money, for ambition, because she believed she deserved more than she had. She does not deserve compassion. She deserves justice. She deserves to spend the rest of her life paying for what she did." Serena's lawyer, despite his best efforts, tried to sow doubt. "The evidence is circumstantial. My client has been the victim of a campaign against her. Julian Thorne is the real culprit. He is using Serena as a scapegoat. You cannot convict someone based on the words of a confessed criminal." But it didn't work. The jury deliberated for 6 agonizing hours. When they returned, the tension in the room was palpable, suffocating. The judge asked for the verdict. The jury foreman stood up, his voice clear and resonant. "In the case of the murder of Ethan Vance, we find the defendant, Serena Hayes, guilty. In the case of the murder of Lydia Torres, we find the defendant guilty. In the case of the murder of Leo Maxwell, we find the defendant guilty. In the cases of the 3 elderly patients at St. Jude's Hospital, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. I looked at Serena. Her face showed no emotion. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, utterly impassive, as if none of this mattered to her, as if she had accepted her fate a long time ago. The judge's voice, clear and unyielding, filled the silent courtroom. Serena Hayes has been found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. I sentence her to 6 consecutive life sentences, without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a low murmur. I could only close my eyes, a profound exhaustion washing over me. It was the end. Serena would never leave prison. She would never harm anyone again. Justice, in its own slow, painful way, had been served. But I felt no joy, only a deep, aching emptiness, because none of this, no verdict, no sentence, would ever bring Ethan back. After the trial, Detective Harding approached me, his expression reflecting the gravity of the moment. "Justice," he said simply. I nodded. "Yes, but at what cost?" He placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You saved Clara, Mrs. Vance. That's what's important. You gave her a chance to have a normal life, a life without lies." He was right. Clara was what mattered now. She was my reason for continuing. I went back home. Beatrice was waiting for me with Clara, who was playing contentedly with her dolls. When she saw me, she ran towards me, her face alight. "Grandma, where were you?" "I had something important to do, my love," I said, gathering her into my arms. "But I'm done now. Now I'm here with you." I hugged her tightly. She smelled of cookies and unadulterated happiness. She was all I needed. The days that followed the trial were calmer, the relentless media circus slowly fading into the background, replaced by other, newer headlines. People found other stories to consume, other tragedies to scrutinize. My focus, however, remained singular and unwavering. Clara. I dedicated myself entirely to giving her the childhood she deserved, a childhood filled with joy, security, and boundless love. I took her to the park, read her stories before bed, and together we baked countless batches of cookies, filling the house with warmth and the comforting aroma of vanilla. Slowly, tentatively at first, she began to call me Mom. At first, the unexpected appellation startled me, a jolt of both bittersweet longing and profound responsibility. Then I realized the natural simplicity of it. I was the only maternal figure she knew, the one who cooked her meals, dried her tears, and sang her to sleep. "Is it okay if I call you Mum?" she asked one night, already 4 years old, lying in her bed as I stroked her dark hair. "Of course, my love," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "You can call me whatever makes you feel comfortable." She smiled, a radiant, innocent beam. "Mum. Grandma." I laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound that felt unfamiliar after so long. "Mum, Grandma," I repeated. She nodded, her eyes serious. "Because you're my grandma, but you're also like my mum." My heart melted, a warmth spreading through my chest. "I like it," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Mum, Grandma sounds perfect. Now sleep. Tomorrow we'll go to the zoo." The months flowed into years. Clara grew, blossoming into a vibrant, intelligent child. She started elementary school, made friends, learned to read and write with a voracious curiosity. She was brilliant, full of an irrepressible zest for life. Sometimes, in her gestures, in the way her eyes would crinkle at the corners when she laughed, I saw Ethan, a fleeting, comforting glimpse of my beloved son. And that, more than anything, brought me a profound sense of peace. Beatrice continued to be my steadfast confidant, my unwavering support. We shared dinner together every week, talking about everything and nothing, Clara's latest antics, life's quiet rhythm, and how, against all odds, we had survived that nightmare, building a new, fragile life from the wreckage of horror. "You are stronger than you thought, Eleanor," she would often say, her eyes twinkling. "You saved that child. You gave her a future." One day, when Clara was 7 years old, she asked the question I had long dreaded, the one I had mentally rehearsed answers for countless times. "Mum, Grandma, where is my other mum? The one who carried me in her tummy?" I took a deep breath, knowing this moment was inevitable. "Your mum was named Lydia," I began, my voice soft. "She was a very brave woman, and she loved you very much. Why isn't she here?" Clara looked at me, her innocent eyes wide and trusting. "Because she had to go to heaven. But before she left, she asked me to take care of you, to give you all the love she couldn't give you." It wasn't entirely a lie. In my heart, I believed Lydia would have wanted me to cherish and protect her daughter. "And my dad?" Another difficult question. "Your dad is in heaven too. His name was Ethan. He was my son, and he would have loved you with all his heart." Clara thought for a moment. Then a small, tentative smile touched her lips. "Then you are my real grandma from my dad." I nodded, a tear escaping the corner of my eye. "Yes, my love. I am your real grandma." She smiled, a radiant, pure expression. "I like it, because then we are connected by the heart." I hugged her tightly. "Exactly, by the heart." I decided not to tell her about Serena. Not yet. Perhaps when she was much older, when she could fully grasp the depth of such betrayal. Years later, when Clara turned 16, I finally told her the whole truth. She deserved it. We cried together, long cleansing tears. She asked questions, listened intently, and slowly, painstakingly, processed the information. It was difficult, painful, but in the end, she said something I will never forget. "Thank you for saving me, Mum, Grandma, for giving me a life." "You saved me too, my love," I replied, holding her close. "You gave me a reason to keep going after losing your dad." We hugged, and in that embrace, I knew that we had healed, together. That despite all the pain, all the darkness, we had found light. The mint green blanket, the unassuming catalyst for all of this, remained stored in my closet. I had washed it countless times, repaired its delicate edges, mended the tiny tear where I had cut the seam. Sometimes I would take it out, hold it, and remember how a small, discarded object had uncovered so many terrible secrets, how it had been the improbable key to unlocking the truth. Today, Clara is 21 years old. She is studying medicine at university, a bright, dedicated student. She wants to be a pediatrician, she says, to help children like her, children who have been through difficult situations, who need someone who understands them. I am so incredibly proud of the woman she has become. Sometimes, I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen Serena throwing that blanket into the trash, if I hadn't rescued it, if I hadn't found the phone. Serena would still be free, perhaps still preying on others. Clara would be growing up under the sinister care of a murderer. But fate, it seemed, had other, more just plans. That October afternoon, 18 years ago now, something deep within me had urged me to act, a force greater than myself. Perhaps it was Ethan. Perhaps it was Lydia, guiding me from wherever they were, ensuring their daughter was safe. Beatrice is still my best friend. She is 83 now, and I am 87. We meet every afternoon for tea, our conversation a comfortable rhythm of reminiscence. We talk about old times, about how we survived that nightmare, about how we built a new life after the horror. "Do you ever think about her?" Beatrice asked me one afternoon, her voice soft. I knew who she was referring to. Serena. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I wonder if she ever felt anything. Any remorse. Any guilt." Beatrice shook her head, her expression unwavering. "People like her don't feel. They just calculate. They just take." She was right. Serena had never shown an ounce of regret, not even in prison. According to what Detective Harding told me years ago, she still insisted that she hadn't done anything wrong, that she had only taken what was due to her, that the world owed her more than it had given her. Julian, on the other hand, did eventually show remorse. He wrote letters, countless letters, asking for forgiveness from the victims' families, from me. I never responded. I couldn't forgive someone who had helped kill my son. But at least he had the decency to admit his guilt, to try and atone for his sins. He died in prison 5 years ago, a heart attack. He was only 53. When I found out, I felt nothing. Neither relief nor sadness, only a profound indifference. It was a closed chapter in a story I preferred to forget. Serena is still alive, serving her 6 consecutive life sentences in a maximum security prison. Clara once asked me if I wanted to visit her, to see the woman who had killed her father, who had stolen her childhood. I flatly refused. "I don't need to see her," I told Clara. "I don't need her explanation. All I need is to know that she is where she should be, paying for what she did." Clara respected my decision. She too had no interest in meeting Serena. For her, that woman was a ghost of the past, someone who existed only in stories, in cautionary tales about the depths of human evil. Her real family was me. It was Beatrice. It was the friends she had made, the people who truly loved her. A few months ago, Clara brought me something. A gift, wrapped in delicate lavender paper. "Open it, Grandma," she told me with a radiant smile. I unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a blanket, new, hand-knitted, mint green in colour, exactly the same as the one I had made so many years ago. "I made it myself," Clara said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "I learned to knit. I wanted to recreate the blanket that united us, the one that saved my life." Tears streamed down my face. I hugged her tight. "It's perfect," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." That night, I spread the new blanket on my bed. Next to it, I took the old blanket out of the closet, the one I had kept all these years. I compared them. They were almost identical in colour and pattern. But this new one had no hidden secrets. It had no pain sewn into its soft fibres. It only had love. Pure, unconditional love, from a granddaughter to her grandmother. "You know," Clara told me one evening while we were having dinner, "I've been thinking about Lydia, about my biological mum. I wish I could have met her." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Me too, my love. From what I've gathered, she was a good person, brave, strong. She was alone and scared. But she loved her baby. She loved you." "Do you think she would be proud of me?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sure of it," I replied without hesitation. "She would be incredibly proud of the woman you are, of your accomplishments, of your kind heart. I believe that from wherever she is, she watches over you. She protects you, Just like your dad, Ethan. Clara smiled through her tears. And are you, Mom? Grandma? Are you proud of me? I looked into her eyes, those eyes that reminded me so much of my son, now filled with resilience and grace. More than proud, my love, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You are the reason I am still here, the reason why every day is worth it. You saved me as much as I saved you. That night, before falling asleep, I held both blankets, the old one and the new one. I thought about the entire journey, the searing pain, the unbearable losses, the horrifying secrets I had discovered, the relentless pursuit of justice I had achieved, and the profound love I had found in the midst of the deepest darkness. The old blanket had been my guide, my map to the truth. It had contained the secret that unmasked a monster, that saved an innocent child, that brought justice for the dead. It was more than a simple blanket. It was a symbol of truth, of resilience, of fierce, maternal love. And now the new blanket represented the future, a future without lies, without pain, without dark secrets. It was the promise that Clara would have the life she deserved, full of love, opportunities, and unbridled hope. 2 blankets, 2 stories, intertwined into one family. I got up from the bed and went to Clara's room. She was asleep, breathing softly, a picture of peaceful innocence. I approached, smoothing her hair, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. I love you, my child, my reason for living. She whispered something in her sleep, a faint, contented sound I didn't understand, but she was smiling. That was enough. I went back to my room, lay down, and closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't have nightmares. I didn't dream of Serena, or of Ethan falling down the stairs, or of Lydia's terrified scream. I dreamed of peace, of a garden full of vibrant flowers, of Clara laughing, of a boundless, beautiful future. When I woke the next morning, the sun was streaming through my window, painting the room in golden light. Clara was already awake, making breakfast. The comforting aroma of coffee and toast filled the air. "Good morning, Mom, Grandma," she greeted me, her voice bright and cheerful. "Good morning, my love." I sat down at the table, watching her move around the kitchen, so full of life, so strong, so utterly different from the scared, traumatized child I had rescued years ago. She had grown up. She had become someone incredible. And I had had the privilege of witnessing it, of being a part of her story, of helping her write a different ending than the one Serena had so cruelly planned. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked me, pouring me a steaming cup of coffee. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "How lucky I am to have you, my love. How lucky I was to have found that blanket that day." Clara sat down across from me, her own smile gentle. "I think about that too, how such a simple object changed everything. It saved my life." "It wasn't the blanket," I told her, reaching across the table to take her hand. "It was you, your existence, the love your dad felt for you. That was what gave me the strength to seek the truth, to never give up." We ate breakfast together, talking about her plans, about university, about her dreams. And I felt that Ethan was there with us, proud, happy, a silent, loving presence in our kitchen. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had put off for years. I went to the cemetery, to Ethan and Lydia's graves. They were in different sections, their final resting places separated by the sprawling landscape of grief, but I visited both. I brought flowers, delicate purple lilacs for Ethan, pristine white roses for Lydia. I knelt in front of my son's grave, tracing the etched letters of his name. Hello, my love. Clara is doing well. She is growing up beautiful, strong, smart. I know you would be proud of her. I am doing my best, trying to be for her what you would have been. I miss you every day, Ethan. But I keep going. For her. For you. Then I walked to Lydia's grave. It was simpler. Fewer flowers, fewer visitors. I knelt again. Hello, Lydia. We didn't meet, but I am taking care of your daughter. I love her as if she were my own. She is wonderful. She inherited your strength, your bravery. I want you to know that she is safe, that she is happy, that she will never lack love. The wind blew softly, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees, a gentle, unseen sigh. I felt a strange peace settle over me, as if both of them were thanking me, as if they knew that I had kept my promise, that I had protected Clara, that I had given her the life she deserved. I returned home as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Clara was waiting for me, dinner ready, the aroma of a home-cooked meal filling the air. We ate together, laughing, telling stories, sharing the quiet joy of our shared life. And when it was time for bed, I went to my room. I took the new blanket, the one Clara had given me, and wrapped myself in its soft embrace. As I closed my eyes, I thought about everything that simple blanket represented. The old one had guarded secrets. It had exposed lies. It had brought justice. The new one guarded promises, hopes, unconditional love. Both were inextricably part of our story, of our harrowing journey. And as I looked at the first stars beginning to glimmer through my window, I understood something profound. That water never forgets, that secrets always, inevitably, find a way to come out, that the truth, though often painful and brutal, is always, always better than a lie, and that love, true love, survives in any darkness. The blanket had been the beginning, the unlikeliest of catalysts. But Clara was the end, the happy ending none of us expected, the miracle that was born from the deepest tragedy. And as I finally fell asleep, I whispered one last prayer. For Ethan, for Lydia, for Leo, for all of Serena's victims. Rest in peace. Your sacrifice was not in vain. Clara lives. Clara thrives.